So, Ani Bonjour, everyone. Welcome to Ancestral Ascensions. Today, we have a really special guest I feel it's special to have this guest on with us today. We have John Rice, who is a renowned elder and has been working in his field for many years. So what I'm going to do is pass it over to you, John, to introduce yourself and what it is that you do.
Okay, miigwech Trish, geget bojo, sagaske indígena cause makon rodem, Wasauksing bunjaba ojube parawarmi minwa bungi Scottish ninenda. So my Ojibwe name is Zagaske, which means a sun ray. My paternal grandmother saw that name for me when I was about 25. She said she saw a ray of sunlight go across the sky before the sun came up, so that's me, Zagaske. And I'm Bear Clan. I'm from Wasauksing First Nation near Parry Sound, Ontario. And just talk a little about the Bungi Scottish. My great grandmother was an orphan who was sent to work here in Canada, and she ran away and lived with people in Shawanaga. And she gave birth to my maternal grandmother, Lucy Pomajuan, who was my major influence in what I do in life. When I was a little boy, she told me stories and filled my head with knowledge and stuff even just now I'm starting to figure out. So a lot of what I do and what I use in my practice came from stories from her. And that's
Nice.
me.
It's a lifelong journey, eh? Like everything that you're learning, even to say that some of the things that she talked to you about are just coming to light for you right now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mm.
It was amazing because the way we do storytelling as people is like only way to describe it's like the shotgun approach. Our elders give us, in some of the stories they give us all of the knowledge, and we don't relate to everything we hear. But as we go through life, pieces of the story become relevant as we mature into a place where we come to understand that knowledge that they gave us.
Absolutely. So what would you say was the catalyst to begin your spiritual journey or the journey of helping others? Because you do help others with being an elder. So if you could share a little bit about that.
Just when I was young, because I was big for my age, my mother would send me to my uncles and aunts if they were having a dispute or something. She would send me over there to help them calm down or talk them through it. So I was about 15. So you could say that's where I really began the art of mediation. And in those days, it was terrifying because a lot of times they were drinking, there was violence. But then I got to see as time went by, most people were in states of uh, upheaval, and they just needed to hear a calm voice or hear reason, and then anything that they're passing through. So at 15, I guess I began what you call intervention. And then as time went by, people would call me up whenever a family member was in distress. And this led into in my 20s, people calling me up to do suicide intervention. And that became a big part of my life for many years. And so just that aspect of trying to find or help people find life purpose, it became something that I do.
Hmm. Yeah, because a big part of that was that feather carriers that you started, eh? Like you were one of the
Mhm.
founding members of that feather carriers. Are you still involved with that, or how is that going?
I teach a cohort. I've stepped back a bit. I'm not as involved as I used to. But feather carriers came about because we originally, Dr. Ed Connors and I, were going to propose to create an Indigenous suicide prevention program. But then when we looked at our culture and looked at all the cultural views, we didn't have that aspect in our life. Everything, when we look at our language, is about procuring life. Eh? So it's all about life promotion when you think about being um, fluent in our language or understanding our language or concepts from our language. It's all about, getting more life. You're thirsty, you get a drink of water. You're
Absolutely.
hungry, you eat. And then the language, it's like that. So we started looking at that as a major element. And then understanding some of our teachings. And they're not beautiful stories or actually have historical fact behind them. And one time I heard my teacher one time, he said that we could live long enough to see Halley's Comet 3 times, which meant we could live to be 150 years,
Mm.
which is good because I heard that in a teaching setting in our lodge. But one day I was driving one of our elders to town, and out of the blue, that's what he said. He goes, "Hey, John, our people used to live long enough to see Halley's Comet 3 times."
Wow.
I just about drove off the road because this was coming from, the grassroots. He wasn't a part of our lodge. He wasn't part of the teachings, but this was an understanding and knowledge he carried, that our people carried. So that really reinforced to me, some of our, the way intrinsic our knowledge is shared.
Absolutely. It reminds me of actually the first time that I met you. I was doing the suicide intervention training there in Midland, and you did a portion of the creation story. Can you give us a little glimpse of that creation story, or can you tell us a little bit more about that creation story? Because I know, like when I was younger and I was first listening to our elders, they would say that whenever we would do something, that we would always begin with that creation story. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, for sure. And in my work, I guess mainstream would say I work in mental health or mental wellness, right? But we don't have those specific ways of describing ourselves as helpers to the people. And I believe that when our teacher used to say all creation stories are true, that was we would have an open mind. And he would say, when you listen to other creation stories, you hear the truth of your own in the other creation stories. But in my work with people, people of different nations and nationalities, our creation stories can very often reflect the psychology of a people, okay, when you hear it. And I know the Anishinaabe creation story, it begins with a being that had a thought. And this thought was, I wonder if there's anybody like me. So even that understanding in our creation story, that gives us that, where we are inclusive. Okay? When we meet a stranger, we see similarities. So right in our creation story, there's that the way we think and the way we act as people. And we know here in North America, Turtle Island, we were very inclusive. We were very welcoming. We did things to make life good for the newcomers. So anyway, the creation story, where this being thought, I wonder if there's anything like me, it goes to another part that explains our intelligence as people. They say beings even older than this one came. And they rolled out a birch bark scroll. And on this scroll where there was a diagram for creation. And these ancient beings told this new creator, if you use the scroll, your creation will work. And then there's another element here that's really important. They said to this new creator, but you're free to experiment. You're free to try things out. So that extends to even down to our concept is the way we think. We have free will. We have individuality. That's even ingrained in our creation story, that when we were walking our life, we have that same thing, freedom to choose how we're going to live our life. So after the creator looked at this blueprint, there were some things that were relevant. Everything you see in creation, the creator saw that on the blueprint. But one of the major things the creator used was a duality. Okay? And we talk about it was a complementary duality. It was a duality like this, where things fit together. Okay? If the nighttime disappeared, so would the daytime. It's how that duality is looked at, which is different from sometimes I remember in public school learning about the conflict, the conflict scale, or whatever it was called. It was like this: man against man, man against nature, man against himself. So it was very conflicting. So here in our people, it's like this: everything fits together. So that's a major way we look at creation, because it's in the creation story. And even this nowadays, where young people are talking about gender fluidity, and these elements, that our people have always understood. It's like this: there's no one definition of one side or the other. It's not even like a spectrum. It's just, it just is how you identify yourself. There's no hard definition if you're a male or a female. Although, you could call yourself a nene, a man, a kwe, a woman. Anishinaabe agokwe, something that would define themselves, how they fit in this complementary duality. So that was a major element of that creation story. So then the creator used, all the way through, the creator used these elements. The first thing the creator was the ball of fire in the sky, and then Akikwe, the earth, and then earth had earth and water, and then the four directions on the earth, the medicine wheel, which is interesting because, the medicine wheel is a strong element of our people. Like there's a medicine wheel out in Alberta that's older than the pyramids that people placed there, our people had out there. So then the moon and then other things, and then the creator using the duality turned her attention to the earth, and she looked in the waters and created two kinds of swimmers. The first swimmers became the plants and the medicines. They floated to the seafloor and filled up the seafloor. And we say they put the nestwind into the water. There was no breath in the water before the plants came. Mm-hmm. And they did that too. They climbed up on the land. And this time of year, you see everything turn green. They put nestwind in the air. They put the breath into the air. So our people have that. It's a really cool thing when you listen to the creation story. You'll always hear about this complementary and this interdependence way we look at life and living. Because even one of the things we say, nestwind, that's oxygen. They put the oxygen in the water, put the oxygen in the air. Before that, it was very carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, when you say from scientific terms. So nestwind is what we know, and even us as human beings, we breathe in the nestwind that the trees created, and they say what we breathe out is matig nestwind, what the trees breathe, tree breath. So there's an interdependency even in our breathing as beings. So the creation story is full of that all the way forward. So all of the plants were created, and then they say the second swimmer turned into the animals in the water because they could breathe in the water. They became those ones that filled the oceans, climbed up on the land. They crawled, they walked, they ran, they became the flyers. That's what happened as a progression. One of the things I forgot to mention, though, the creator always returned to that original question, is there anybody like me? So when the creator, every time the creator created something, she asked that question, are you like me? And nothing answered that question. That's why the creation takes so long. Even the blade of grass was asked that question before the creator created the next thing. So all the way on through to the animal worlds. And in Anishinaabe, we say the eagle was the second last one created, and he flew into creation. And then us humans were the last ones. Chronological hierarchy, because we're new, it's we have to learn how to fit in. So we look at the older plants and the animals. That's why we use that term, Mishomis and Nokomis, when we pray to the living things that are older than us, because they can teach us. So this whole element of interdependency is important. And that goes to us and humans and how we relate. We think in terms of interdependency. We can't survive without each other. So that's how. So that's a little bit about the creation story, right up into to us human beings.
Mm-hmm. I like that it's really based on integration. Like integration seems to be the main theme of what you're talking about. It's interesting. I just had a discussion yesterday morning actually about the duality, I guess, and even thinking of like the yin and the yang, or the masculine and feminine, and all of those kinds of things. And it's funny that you say exactly what you're saying, that there's that integration, that it's not a spectrum, because I was saying, well, it must be a spectrum, just exactly what you just said there. So so that's interesting that there is that idea of integration. um and I'm wondering if you could maybe expand a little bit more, even in terms of this gender fluidity, as you have brought up there. So how does that look in terms of the integration, or are we looking at more of a spectrum on that? Because that wasn't particularly what we were talking about, but since you brought it up, I'm sure many people would really like to hear about um, you know, how that looks, I guess, for our people.
Yeah, it's reflected in the language. And Anishinaabe doesn't have pronouns. Okay?
Okay.
So I'm sure because we lived closely together, we were interdependent. We did everything day by day. We would use our names, we'd address each other by our names. So that was because we're actually spirit beings in living form. So our name was important. So we don't have he and she in our language. We don't have that. We don't have that because you would announce your name. And by listening to that name and what it was all about, you could see, that integration or that element of who we are, that something wasn't totally one way or the other way. There are elements inside. I always joke about myself, because when they talk nowadays about role responsibilities and stuff like that, and they say a man's role is fire, well, I'm no good at fire. I always say me and fire don't get along. It takes me a long time to light a fire. So, but I'm good at water. I don't think I would ever do a water ceremony, but water is my element. At one time in my life, that was what I was a plumber. I understood how water flowed. Sometimes I can look at a wall and I can see the force, the gravity. I guess I can see it as water flowing down to the ground. So for me, water is an element. So we're not confined, to be one specific way. And in this modern time, the influence of the colonization makes us think that way. So you could say that someone isn't really, there's no real definition. But what you do is you define yourself when you speak to people. And actually, you announce your name as that definition. But how our people handle that pronoun, It was my grandmother, She was saw herself as a female. So she used she all the time, when she used a pronoun, Because I can remember her saying that about me as a little boy, That John Isaac, she's a bad boy. That's how she spoke. She spoke from the feminine. And a lot of men, that's how they speak. They speak from the masculine. And to listen to the young people nowadays, how they use the pronoun they and them, they're trying to find that one that's in between. Because it's interesting. Some European languages are like that. German has die and der and das. They have a neutral in there. So it's interesting that whole concept of gender, because there's no specific definition. When you spend time with a person, you hear what they're all about. You can hear that there's no, prototypical man, because he'll have elements. Because we are of our mother and our father, So we get elements from our mother and our father. So to say that you're only one side is denying the other side. And we see that anyway. When we meet each other, we see both elements of what they call masculine and feminine. So that's what's really important. And it's really good that the young people are bringing that back because our people were really understanding of that. We really understood that, it's about you, your identity from who you are. And then from that, people hear what you're all about, your life purpose even.
So I guess it's more your name identifies your spirit because we are spiritual beings, right? So I remember one time actually Sugar Bear actually was the person who gave me my Anishinaabe name, or my spirit name is what I like to call it, because he says this is how the spirit world knows you. That's what he said to me when he gave me my name. And I thought, wow, what a really cool way to look at it, that I am this as a
Yeah.
spirit. I'm not this or that or identifiable as this or that. And I a few years back, probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I listened to John Trudell's last speech, actually, that he had made publicly before he passed away. And he talked about labels. And I found it very interesting, about the labeling because as we label each other, we are segregating ourselves as instead of integrating ourselves. So it
Yeah,
really does come full circle with exactly what you're saying in terms of integration about that creation story.
yeah,
So what a awesome, like, Chimigwech for that. Like that's a really full circle teaching there for me.
yeah. And that's what it all circles back to identity, eh?
Mhm,
Your own identity is what is the most valuable.
mhm,
And because we're like I always tell, we're intelligent people, eh? So that there's paradoxy in a lot of what we do because that's the way our minds work. Eh? We can see, like we said, the duality. It's even in our thinking. So it's like the more you understand yourself as an individual, the more you see yourself as interconnected with others. It's like as long as we're on the topic of talking about names, your spirit name, you'll find people with similar names. So it's almost like you're born into a society of names. Eh? If someone had like a medicine name, if she was named Wingashkwe, then
mhm,
she'd also feel a connection to someone named Sama, tobacco, or Gish Kondak. People carrying medicine names, they would all feel like they belong to the same society. And there'd be like an interdependency and a really good understanding that, oh, you have a name like mine, you have similar life experiences as I do. And it's interesting because we have the whole concept that you're making me think too big now. But we talk about the trees, the tree beings, Matikanabe, we call them, the rock people, Asinabe, and then the water beings, we categorize all of these elements all around us, and then even within our names, there's that too. So if someone has a sky name, all those people with sky names, and then you have people with animal names or thunder being names, they all belong to an exclusive society, it feels like, which when you think about it is inclusive of all those other things. So
mhm,
it is for me to say like my name is a sun name, it's like people with sun names. We all belong to the same kind of understanding, way of thinking, maybe even way of being. It's just like two Matikanabe, the tree beings.
mhm.
So there's no, even the human aspect of who we are. There's no hard definition from things like Asanabe, Matikanabe. Then we go into those other guys, like Sabe,
Right.
and then the little people, all those things that we talk about. It's such a beautiful way of being.
Absolutely. So the name that I was given actually was Evening Hummingbird Woman. So I always say like not Nakshina Nushkaskwe or Nanoshkaskwe, I guess is more correctly the pronunciation. And I hope to learn more about this actually when I go to take the language here in September. To really understand what is that, in terms of the hummingbird. I have heard the teaching that the hummingbird was the smallest of the thunder beings, and I don't know, do you know anything more about that?
Yeah, actually, so one of our things is all birds are thunder beings. They all
Oh,
have a
okay.
specific purpose. Because
Okay.
the other thing, though, in Anishinaabe, the hummingbird is one of our war chiefs, we say,
Mm,
because that little bird is so territorial, protects so fiercely. So it's one of our models to how to be a chief. So that's one thing about the hummingbird.
mhm,
But the thunder beings, for Anishinaabe, that's a big thing for us. We say for every human being, there's a thunder being. So
mm.
we're not just looking at the popular birds. There's all sorts of birds. But the hummingbird is an example of one.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Awesome. So also I just wanted to, if you could maybe expand a little more on any kind of teaching that you feel would assist people along on their path. I've had various different guests, I've had some really young people who are just starting out in their own businesses, trying to find that balance in their lives. Talking about the how they've overcome worlds of addiction and, childhood trauma, all of those kinds of things. Like, I guess, how can we begin maybe that? that journey, or how do we begin to look for that, I guess?
Yeah, I really believe that the knowledge is the knowledge we carry as people are little seeds. If we pick those up and put those in our mind, when we did feather carriers, one of the biggest things we talk about is living to be 150, living to see Halley's Comet 3 times. So we talk about there are 7 stages in life, and the first 4 stages are basically developmental stages. So you could be maybe as young as 45 or 50. So then you have 100 years left of knowing who you are
Yeah.
to live. So even that concept of 150 years, we say that. And when I talk to young people, I say, it's a good thing to have a really quick meditation. It's very easy. One morning you might wake up. And I always say this, do this. If you're 20 years old, go like this, have a big stretch. 130 more to go. When we do that, we don't have to do it every day. But when we do that, it gives you that expectation that not everything is so immediate. You've got time to do things. In this modern culture, where you got to graduate high school by about 17. You might be finished your first degree by about 20, 22, and you go right through your education. So maybe you're in your mid 30s, you've got your doctorate or something, and then you get a job, or somewhere in there you have a job, and then you turn 65 and you retire. In our thinking, that's very short, because I was lucky. My stepdad came from Ear Reserve, Cape Croker, and he talked about that. He said, a man is in his prime from 45 to 75. That's what he said. All things considered, his physical capacity, but mostly how he uses his mind. Our prime of our life is 45 to 75. So when you think about working until you're 65, you're being put out to pasture right in the prime of your life. And then same with our women. When they go into menopause and they finish this creative part of their life, they can actually move into roles that men do, like firekeeping. We're one of the cool cultures that doesn't confine you to who you are by your body. So the later part of our lives is spent doing free will by what you see your spirit doing. So that element of living to 150, when we put that in our thinking and put that in our mind, for some of us it can reduce anxiety about having to get things done right away or having to finish it. And you see many of our people going back to school after they've raised children, getting their degrees and post-secondary degrees. So that's one of the things, the advantages we have as people, because we think that way. And before colonization, before Columbus was here, our villages were full of people in the hundreds. And even now, there are many families, you just need to think back 2 or 3 generations. You got someone there who's 100. So that aspect of living life. And the other thing too is have an observational view of life. When you see something happen, don't assume that's the way it is. Just look at that and then watch for that to happen again. That's how we become elders, through observation. You see things. I always say that, saying, just when I think I've seen it all, I see some more. So that idea of observational, taking your life in an observational way, that you're not to jump to conclusions. That's the way life is, to go through life. And I was lucky. I had teachers who always said that. Do you feel like you've done this before? What the most important, they said, watch this. You might have to do this someday. Is what they said. So that aspect of being observational, because that all adds up, and that's what happens when people become, knowledge keepers or knowledge carriers. They've had that observational element in their living, so they're open-minded because they've seen many things. They haven't become just caught in one way.
And maybe talk a little bit about identity, because, as you know, many of our young people or any of our people in general. Like even when I think of my grandfather, and the book that he wrote, Not Wolf Nor Dog, coming from, two different races, I guess you could say, with having an English mother, you know, I think that because we can't identify, or we haven't been able to as a people identify who we are, is there some words that you can give our people in terms of how they identify with themselves? Because we've got a whole lot of things going on right now with pretendians. I actually even just read an article that somebody has been charged for identifying as First Nations, and taking opportunities that were set aside for our people. So maybe we can talk a little bit more about that identity.
Well, yeah, I know. And my teacher, he had a really good view. He said that goes back to as long as you have one drop of Wewe Nabojo's blood in you, he said, then that opens us up to our culture. So, like for me, like I say, my great grandmother was Scottish, and I acknowledge her when I announce myself. I say Bungie Scottish, because she was my grandmother's mother. And I learned that when I was young because I was militant when I was young. I used to say I was full blood Ojibwe. And then one day I was talking and my grandmother's words were coming out of my mouth. So I thought, how could I do that, Saying full-blooded, because my main teacher was my grandmother, who was basically what they call in her day a half-breed, half Scottish. So that's why I acknowledge her lineage, being part Scottish, because that's part of who I am. And her knowledge and the way she grew up. She basically, even though she was half white, she grew up in her village, fluent in the language, fluent in the culture. There was nothing given to her that was European. So we think of those things, but we think about what came down to us from our lineages. Our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. That's the first place to think. And in there, that's where we have our identity. So that's where we come from. So it's always important to acknowledge ancestors. And then that's what happens when you get to people who don't have that ancestry, talking about being one of us. They don't have the lineage. They don't have the ancestry. In a sense, they're not quite full in terms of what we have, in terms of culture. They'll never quite connect. There'll always be something a little bit off by how they say things. So there are a couple of things to consider. There's we see it on both sides of the paradigm, Indigenous and non-Indigenous. You see one of the things we talk about is assimilation. We assimilate into their culture, and some of them assimilate into our culture. And in that value, it's a good thing. They're not being, taking things from, our opportunities. They're fitting in with us. They're living with us. They're not professing to be, a knowledge carrier or professing to be this ceremony conductor. They're respectful. So it works both ways. Like some of our people are happily living down on, I don't know for any of them like that, but maybe living on Bay Street in Toronto, happily enmeshed in that financial life. So assimilation is one thing. So that's what we understand. Then we talk about appreciation, cultural appreciation. We appreciate each other's culture, but we don't mix them in. But this aspect nowadays is because that element of we can never fully go back to living a traditional life. Right? It's just, to be honest, it's not allowed anymore. We can't travel anywhere. In the bush, I've walked in the bush, and in the middle of nowhere, I've seen no trespassing signs. What a concept! To come across a no trespassing sign in the middle of nowhere. So even that aspect, we can't live as Indigenous people the way we want. So we live in this modern time because that's how we survive. We're adaptable. We're adaptive. But how we do it in our own way, based upon our languages, our cultures, those belong to us. So when you have someone who's non-Indigenous, who's, basically making a living off of teaching what we carry. That's not right. Pretendian, they call them. And that person is doing it principally for financial gain. When you look at what they've done, they've replaced someone, or maybe some of our people haven't even had the opportunity to take that measure because there was also racism involved. So preventing our people from becoming, well, it's against the law for us to become lawyers, doctors at one time. We have to give up our rights. So that's ironic. We have to give our rights to become a doctor. We become white, but we're Indian white.
Yeah.
So,
Yes. Well, even in the world wars, right? Like our people had to give up our status to even fight in the First and Second World War. And then when they came back, they weren't treated as a veteran, they were treated as an Indian. So, they didn't get the same benefits that other veterans got when they returned home. And that brings up, child welfare, not knowing what the lineage is, and that there was a point in making sure that we did not understand what our lineage is, so I think that really does open it up for a lot of I would say especially for our own people, who maybe have come from that child welfare background. 60 skip survivors, we still see 1 in 3 of our children in care. How can we help to, I guess, maybe bring those ones back into the fold? We see so many that are falling through the cracks in terms of child welfare.
yeah, there was a big a young guy from Jordina Island hung himself outside a group home, and he hung there all winter before he was found. So that community, through their worker Shannon Craig, requested and got an inquest. They called the Freeman Inquest. So that made one of the principal recommendations they made was all children in care by whatever agency, group home, whatever, has to endeavor to get that child to set foot in their home community. So that's one element that's happening. The other thing is, it was such an overwhelming thing. Our people are still in a state of, if you want to call it, shock. How do we react to all of this? Our children being taken away, and for sure we don't have the resources to hunt down our own children and find them. That's not open. So many records were sealed, or we can't look at things because of this. Like genocide, ending a line. That old, I can't remember which old white guy said that about, ending genocide, and there'll be no living Indians in Canada, and they'll all be either dead or absorbed by the body politic, he said. The irony of his statement, though, is we are part of the body politic. For professional people like yourself, there's doctors, there's lawyers, there's teachers. We're all part of Canadian society now, but we're still here as Indigenous people. But I'd like to see that guy who made that statement. He must be rolling over in his grave, because we're still here. We're still doing what we do. But
Was
we
that
really
John A. McDonald, or
yeah, it was one of
for the
those Johnny
residential
McDonald.
schools? Yeah.
Yeah, or Duncan Scott Campbell. One of them said that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But the thing, like the agency I work for, the Nagda Windmug, we're on the beginning steps. We're only 5 years old. We're trying to put things in a better way. Now, we still have to do what the mainstream did, but we're starting to do more things that are from our culture. One of the things that, like we're trying to have a more open culture about how we do things. And it is an argument when we work against the province and their policies, because it was such a, it was just, stealing our children, basically. So regaining our culture, and the sense of identity, for sure. And, and Truth and Reconciliation Commission that came out with those 4 questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? What's my purpose? that's the foundation elements of what we need to be doing as people, instilling that in everything that we do, our school, our education, our work life, even how we get along again. But it's still a big process. We're just at the beginning of finding our children, bringing them home.
Mhm. What were those 4 questions again that we need to keep in mind?
Yeah, just where do I come from? Who am I? Where am I going? And what's my purpose?
Mm.
We say those are 4 questions we carry in our minds all the way through our life. And even the newborn baby is born with those questions. So these young children who are in care, they wonder. When I worked in the mental health system, there were a couple of indigenous guys. They had been diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic. And I sat and I talked with one, and he'd been raised by a white family. So I said to him, you know that they call you paranoid schizophrenia because people are always looking at you. You can look at this. I said, did you ever think that you as a family got stared at a lot? He said, yeah, we did. So I said, your family was included in that. That aspect of being different. That what it placed on him and a couple of other young men I had a chance to talk to. So we look different in a non-Indigenous family, so that creates that, who are we? We need to find out who we are to help young people begin that journey, why they look different from the family that maybe raises them, or even the different innate feelings they have, that they don't fit in, something's wrong. So we need to expand our reach to find these ones and help them.
Mm-hmm. And thinking of purpose, like that purpose, who am I? Where do I come from? What's my purpose? Do you think that purpose morphs over time as we go? Like, you know, like I don't know. I just look back at my life and I remember, being 20 years old and actually envisioning what I would be doing at 40 years old. I don't, and then even at, 23, I was envisioning what I would be doing when I was a really old woman. So like, that's probably out of the norm. I don't know. But that purpose, can you give me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, in our teachings, we say before we came here, we talked to the Creator. The Creator told us everything. The Creator didn't want us to bump in life by accident. So in that conversation, we found out we had a purpose. And we found we're coming here to life to do something. So when we left the Creator, we came here, and they say, now we come to life. It's, the people older than us who we're born into would help us find our purpose. They would observe our behavior. They could see who's going to be a leader, a healer, a teacher, a protector, or what we call a scout, a skabele. They could see that in our behaviors as children crawled on the floor. And then the element of your spirit name. When they heard your spirit name, that's actually what our education is based upon, your spirit name. Because then your village helps you grow into your name. They'll help you grow up to be who you are. That's what happens. Okay. But in your name is your purpose. Okay? When you sit down and meditate on your purpose, the name my grandmother found for me is Wasauksing. She said the ray goes across the sky before the sun comes up. So that speaks to some of the way I am. I go ahead, and then I come back. But the other element of that name, it says that the sun punches through the darkest cloud, and that sun ray breaks through the dark cloud. I had no idea. I grew into this without knowing until I sat and realized that spoke to my involvement in suicide intervention. It's in my name. I can go into those dark stories and help people find light in their lives. So that's in my spirit name. So if you meditate on your spirit name, you'll see elements of why you're here and even why you become who you are. But it's they say it's a lifelong meditation. You find out more and more as you go along. So that's one of the foundation elements is knowing our spirit names. So it's really good nowadays that our people are doing that. They're finding who they are by their name spiritually, and that they'll find their purpose. The purpose is important. What helps you have a sense of fulfillment. And also it helps you at times when you feel like giving up. Knowing your name helps you, gives you the will to carry on. I came here. This is what I do. No one else can do it. In fact, we say in the knowledge gathering time of your life, that old guy Maslow becomes self-actualized. They say at that time in your life, that's where you come to see yourself, as a piece of creation even. When you're a baby, you heard that you're a gift of the Creator. At that time in your life, you see yourself as that gift. You say, all of this is mine. You become totally confident in who you are and in your purpose. And that's the way we were. So purpose is important. One of the things too to remember though is, like, this is the modern time we live in. A lot of what we do traditionally can fit in this modern time. Other things can't, like, our own careers, like visions, seers, pipe carriers, that element don't fit in this modern realm. So those are things to remember. Because one of the things I say I do too is I'm a traditional career counselor. I can see someone who might be able later on be able to do sweat lodges or do naming ceremonies and those things. So those are elements of our culture that are important.
So what would one do then if they don't have their spirit name and they're searching for their spirit or for their purpose, their spirit's purpose or their soul's purpose here on earth? What kinds of things, or where can they go, or what can they do even to even bring that or invite that into their own life?
Okay, we didn't really lose things. Things have always been here for us. We just, didn't do them. So one of the easiest things you could do right now is to get grandparents to name their grandchildren, to encourage that. Because that's who used to name us back in the day. Like my grandmother saw my name. That was the natural way it happened. But nowadays, it's to search around. What you look for is people who can find names, name finders, people who have that capacity to go to the spirit world and see what your spirit name is. And then that takes a little bit of a conversation where they get to know you a little bit, and then you give them tobacco. And people who find him, there's so many different ways that they do it. There's no one set way. But eventually that person will see your spirit name, and then they'll arrange for it to be announced in this creation. Because back in the day, it was announced not too long after you were born. That's why we struggle so much. Our names come later. There's almost like a time in our life where like it's empty, there's a void. And then we get our spirit name, and then there's a fulfillment after we know our name.
Yeah, it's a journey. It definitely is a journey. And I know what has worked for some people is just to be able to put that tobacco out or that sema, and with those intentions of finding whatever it is, really understanding how powerful our medicines are. There is a reason why they are called medicines. Absolutely. That's one thing that I've learned through experience in my life. And that's something that you can do as an individual person to ask for those things.
And that's what, when we talk about, mental health and well-being, it's so focused on identity, who you are, where you come from, knowing your lineage. There's so much to it that gives you so much well-being, so much, wholeness when you see that. So a lot of times when people come to me, that's all we do. We just explore identity. What's your clan? What's your name? What reserve did you come from? Or if you didn't come from a reserve, where did you live? There are settlements. Like you even think of Jane and Finch in Toronto. That's a settlement.
Yes, absolutely. Well, even people like, say, for example, people who live in North Bay, or, like I find North Bay in particular for some reason in my life. My grandmother came from North Bay, but I know a lot of other people who, come from North Bay. They have the lineage who just have not, especially I find more north or more west. You think that you come from this town, but really you come from that ancestral lineage of our people, even if that's not the way that you've been raised. But I find there's a, you can almost feel it from people when you meet them, that there is something more here to them.
Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure.
Yeah, so I think, keeping in mind those kinds of things, but you know, um, finding that lineage is a big one. Using those medicines to find out where you need to go, or ask Creator to show you where you need to go. So I'm
Yeah.
really glad that you did bring up the meditation piece, and also about clans, and I mean clans is a whole another piece of the pie to this, and
Yeah.
so maybe what I'll say is, if you want to expand a little bit more on the clan system, and how that does give us clues or more information about who we are and where we come from. And in the meantime, I will shuffle my cards while you go on with the.
All right. So the clan system was actually, there are two stories, but the one I like is the animals gave us a clan system. 7 original animals gave us a system that basically lets us know how a village works, because each clan has a responsibility. There were two kinds of leadership, outside the village and inside the village. And there was a philosopher, advisor to those two chiefs in the fish clan. And then there was a protector, of the children and the village, was the bear clan. Because they lived on the outside the village, they became the medicine people. And then the Martin clan, he's the strategist. He can see a pile of sticks and turn it into a home. So he's the strategist builder. And then same thing with him. If someone breaks what you make, and you want to protect that. So they became warriors in those times when there were threats. The Martin clan and the Deer clan were the soft-spoken ones, the gentle ones. They could sense vibes. They were like a harmony in the village. And nowadays they'd like be the social workers. That's what they would be. And then the Bird clan, they flew close to the sky world, so they're connected to the spirit. So they had the teachings and the spiritual teachings, but because they planted seeds of knowledge, they also were the gardeners. So there were 7 responsibilities within a village. So in the Anishinaabe people, that's passed on father to children. It goes through the patrilineal, it's called. Even though we're a matriarchal society, in the Anishinaabe way of doing things, everything's a duality. So if the father carries the line, then he's like this, he'll help raise the children because he's the clan. So he stays around and raises the children into the clan. And the beautiful thing about that system is when the children are the smallest, they go to their mother's teachings. So they get the mother's clan teachings. And then, so as we know both ours, like my mother's beaver clan, my father's bear clan. So we know those 2 responsibilities are inside. And my mother said we're made up of 2 clans because we're twice as smart. If you were just married within one clan and there's only one clan, she says you only have one smartness. So we marry another clan. We put our children together. These children are twice as smart because they carry those 2 lineages. But the clan system is important because it brought in, harmony within a village. And each clan has a role. So when we think about ourselves individually, your spirit name, there's elements in your spirit no one's going to change. That's your personality. That's who you are. That's who the Creator sent here. That's what we get here to create, is you at that level, the personality level. But your father and your mother and their clan, they wrap a character around that. They wrap the character around your personality. So there are things that your parents went through, especially in this day and age when we talk about residential schools, 60 scoops. Whatever helped those people survive that, it gives character. So, like we might not have had good experiences with our parents because of what they went through, but there was a quality of them that made them survive that, what they went through, and they passed that on to us. So the clan is actually the character around your personality, like a bear clan, the beaver clan. Because my father died when I was young, I'm more my mother because my mother raised us as a single parent. So I can, be a little more Martin clannish, if you want to say it that way, because that's the way
Okay.
she is. So that's what the clan does. Your function in the village, also from your parents, the quality of who you are was given to you. This day and age, if you can look past what they suffered and see their survival mechanisms because they passed those on to you.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's a little bit about the clan system and how it's such a important element to who we are.
Awesome, miigwech. Okay, so I pulled out some cards here. I did a little bit of shuffling. And so the first card that popped out was Stand Your Ground. It's in
Oh,
the mountains.
nice.
And I find it really interesting here with the duality that we see, the light and the dark and and the stars that are in there.
Yeah.
So and then I thought, oh well, I only got one card. I'll see if another one comes out. And another one did come out, but then as I was placing them, there was a card behind that one, and it's the medicine guardian.
Oh, wow.
So, and we were talking about that being open to healing information, which is, I think, really ultimately what the whole ancestral ascensions is all about is to be open to that healing, because I truly believe that if
Mhm.
we can heal ourselves, that we can help to heal Mother Earth,
Yeah.
because I always say, like, she doesn't need us to live here. We absolutely need her to live here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so and those medicines and how powerful those are. And even I just look at this staff here, I don't know what exactly it means in Christianity, but I know that in medicine that they have oftentimes there's that staff like that. So for me, what that reminds me of is the duality, right? So the whole process in the body of like the pineal and the pituitary gland and the masculine and feminine that
Mhm.
goes together within us.
Yeah.
um I don't know, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, well, that symbol there, he's carrying the snake.
Mm-hmm.
Our understanding that there's a snake that lays across the doorway to life. It's called Gagagaganabe, the everlasting snake.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that's going to be a healer touches that snake before it comes into life.
Mm-hmm.
So, in our young people, if you know someone, they might dream about a white snake or a silver snake. Then we would say they have an aptitude to become a healer, and they can be directed in that. So the snake is the healer. It is that healing, the one that um, identifies who can be a healer in life. We all know that the snake, he's the guardian of the medicines, and he crawls amongst them. He touches all of it. So that's another what he carries.
Mm-hmm.
So that symbol that he's carrying, we have that similarity in terms of believing the snake is the one who identifies healers or brings healing.
Awesome. That's so amazing, and then, and I truly do believe that, all cultures bring a piece of the pie, like there's
Yeah,
no one right way. It's all that we are all connected, right?
yeah.
Again, this integration that you're talking about. But then this one came up and it totally reminded me of you, which is the Shaolin master, be graceful in movement and action. Doesn't that remind me? It reminds me of you anyways.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, you had a piece. Do you not do martial arts as well?
yeah. That's a big part of my development. Actually,
Yes.
martial arts give me my voice, eh? Well, two things, drumming and martial arts.
Mhm.
Because in martial arts, you have to stand up and, talk to, you have to instruct, eh? So that's what
Mhm.
gave me my voice. And then drumming gave me something to talk about, was fundamentally our culture, introducing the song, why we have the song. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it is. And did you see this little praying mantis? Do you know anything about that? Like what that might be representing?
Uh, I know the praying mantis is very, well, it's very feminine. It's the female praying mantis. Yeah,
Hmm.
that's, that she eats the male, after they mate.
Yeah. Yes.
So I guess it's not to well, I guess where you have your last bit of fun as a male, I guess, before you get. But it's also
Fun.
like a very strong spirit. I got a story. My brother and I went to, when we were young, must have been about 7 and 12. We went to a birthday party to a friend, a cousin who lived on the inside the reserve. We were walking home along the railway tracks, and I don't know what happened, but there was a praying mantis standing right in the middle, and the energy he gave off. We just had to go back and walk along the road rather than try to cross. So it was just this powerful energy that he had.
Mhm. And I think like the males, they're the ones that provide the nourishment for the babies, right? Like that's why they do give up their life. Like I think that's
Yeah.
also pretty honorable,
Hmm.
as a species, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, so well, miigwech for all of your teachings here today,
Oh,
and I'm sure that it's going to help so many people out there. And I really do feel that, if people are looking for those answers in life, that we need to find those medicines.
yeah.
We need to remember the duality in life. The
Yeah.
integration, as you say, the integration of duality, which really makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Um, and I like the idea of the graceful movement and action, you know, even when we think about like our language, right? Like that's a big piece of why I want to learn our language is because it is a moving and
Yeah.
fluid language, eh?
Yeah.
And when you think of that fluidity, it does remind me of the water,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know, it all pulls that in. Well, thank you for taking your lunch break today
Okay,
and
Trish.
joining us.
Yeah, my
So
pleasure. Yeah.
yeah, so take care and bon appetit.
Okay. Bye, Mapi.